Welcome to the Pilates Physios, where anatomy meets abs and science meets sweat. I'm Tanya, physiotherapist and co-founder of Studio Pilates International. I'm super passionate about making Pilates education better and training world-class Pilates instructors with real-world skills.
And I'm Mangahas, a physiotherapist, course facilitator and veteran Pilates instructor.
Together we're diving into the world of Pilates from a physio's point of view, breaking down movement science, busting myths, sharing instructing tips, and helping you become the Pilates instructor everyone wants teaching their class.
Let's talk about programming. So this one is a big topic. Obviously from our experience, a good program can almost make or break a class, and it can be something that can make a class really effective and also keep our clients safe. Let's have having a bit of a chat. Where do you want to start off with, Tan?
Yeah, you're so right with that. The programming is make or break. And, obviously an instructor needs to be good at cueing, good at correcting, good at motivating. But if you do all those things and you still don't have a good program, it's not going to be a good class. So that's why we do focus so much on programming in our courses. Probably where to start with the programming is Joseph Pilates' centering principle. And this is something that, I try and do classes in lots of different places, lots of different companies, everywhere I travel, I'll go somewhere and try and do a Pilates class. And it blows me away sometimes just the programming that some instructors do. You literally walk out and feel like you've done nothing, or you feel sore because, you've done 10 hours of roll down stretches all in a row. I literally have been to a class where that happened. So the best instructors are also the best at programming, I would say. But with the centering principle, that's why that principle exists. You start off needing to work the center or the core, and that's why we always start our classes with ab exercises, because every single other exercise that you do, if you don't have your abs switched on, your back's going to arch, you're going to be all over the place. You don't have that stability. You don't have the core strength to then be able to get more power with your peripheral muscles, and you're more likely to injure yourselves. And even within the centering principle, it's you starting off with more activation, lower level exercises of the abs, working the transversus abdominis and pelvic floor, and then layering those exercises and bringing more abs on top of that. So you might start with abs. Before you go and do a whole lot of leg work, you should be activating the glutes because they're the stabilizers of your pelvis and hips. Before you do upper body work, you should be working on those lower trapezius, serratus anterior, or those shoulder blade stabilizers. So definitely the principle of centering is a big one. And, sometimes you'll see people starting a class in standing, and they're going to be all over the place. Nothing's activated. You need to activate those core muscles first and then bring in those harder exercises in more difficult positions later. So I think that's step one of the big things. I don't know, what's your big thing that you find?
I think that probably the next one after that, because 100% agree, center outwards is probably your first main principle that you want to think about. The second one is got to do with essentially layering or choosing exercises that are going to get an exercise effect. Obviously for myself, for yourself, Tanya, we're both physiotherapists. We want to start thinking about putting exercises together to actually produce a result. And, over and over again, there's, if you look at any, hypertrophy study, a lot of it is based on we need to get the muscles to get some form of mechanical tension in them. So, and a degree of mechanical tension where the muscles will get enough for them to force to actually get stronger, okay? And that can only really occur with smart programming. With the Pilates exercises, the great thing about them is that they're not as heavy loading as, let's say, for example, doing a 200 kilo deadlift, for example. Okay, there's not really going to be an exercise that mimics that in your Pilates repertoire. So what we have to do then is we have to be able to select and sequence exercises together to be able to cumulatively get that mechanical tension so that the person can still get the result that they want from their Pilates, And so that means things like very similar to what you just said, just 10, with, let's say, for example, if we're putting programs together to work the legs, we want to layer the exercises together where like the like muscles or muscles that work similarly around the same joints get put together so that after the set number of exercises, they can actually get all the mechanical tension and you can get stronger afterwards. So a good example of this is doing an exercise that isolates the glutes and then doing another exercise after that will get the glutes working, but also maybe the hamstrings, for example. And then after that, maybe including the quads. And then what that does is that you're accumulating that mechanical tension exercise after exercise. And then that way you can actually get a little bit of a result from it. A lot of people say these days that, in terms of like rep range, your really effective rep range these days are between 5 to 30 repetitions. And the cool thing about Pilates, we probably edge more so towards the higher end, of course, but that's what we want to look for. We want to look for those high end of repetitions by layering our exercises together really, really well. I will bet my house on it that basically if I do a leg exercise followed by an arm exercise, I'm not going to get as good of a result as if I put 2 leg exercises together or 3 leg exercises together. That's going to produce much more of a response in my body as opposed to just picking and choosing different body parts from exercise to exercise.
So basically, if you can't feel the burn, you're not building muscle.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
No, I would agree with that. You do need to, scientifically you do. You have to have the muscles fatiguing. You have to have them feeling like they're working, and you're going to get way better results. Albeit sometimes, not everyone enjoys the old burn.
Oh, definitely.
You do get better results from it, and on top of getting a better result and getting stronger muscles with that layering, there's also the flow and the frustration you can experience as a client where you might be, lying on your back and you do one abdominal exercise and then you're on your side and then you're doing a glute. Sometimes it takes people a few exercises in a row to even engage their abdominals. Like you have to get your brain to really that mind-body connection to think, okay, abs, tighten, transversus abdominis, activate. And you might get to the end of the first exercise and your abs are just kind of starting to switch on. And then you swap away from it and then your brain has to focus on another muscle group. And then you're focusing on another muscle group. Like it's a lot for the brain. It's a lot for the coordination. Once you start to work a muscle, it's easier to keep focusing on it and activating it. So aside from building more strength, I think it's easier brain and coordination wise as well. Nothing worse than it's like if you're doing an aerobics class, you finally get the step and then the next minute we're onto something different. I don't know about you, but I wasn't really good at aerobics, good at Pilates. But, it's frustrating as a client as well. So I think that, layering those same muscle groups keeps that mind-body connection. I think it's easier in that sense too. And you see some really weird programming out there. There are, I don't know if you found this, but recently, we have a lot of people bridging across from other courses, and always encourage people to do as much training as possible. You often learn something new every different course you do. But one of the biggest comments that we kind of get is that our programming is a lot more specific. And, a lot of courses popping up lately that haven't been around for as long, might be a little bit smaller. And some of the programming things that I'm seeing are sometimes a little bit strange and more focused on almost yoga principles or really thinking about the flow and how it looks as opposed to really, I guess, stepping back and scientifically going, okay, well, what's going to work the best? How are we going to get the best strength gains, the best flexibility gains? And there is definitely a specific order of the best way to do that. And, we've kind of had a team of us physios and others, I guess, really refining all of that programming. And I think there's a definite method for that. And when you deviate too much from that, sometimes you just don't get the best results in the class.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes if you're focusing too much on how a class flows, for example, I mean, we can talk about that as much as we want. Sometimes though, what that can do is it can actually decrease the safety in the class, for example, because, just like you said before, if your muscles aren't working as well as they should be, you might have lower levels of coordination. If you're changing from exercise to exercise, you don't really get time to set and make sure that you're stable in that movement. And so you keep moving from one movement to the other, you can start to forget occasionally certain things. And this is really, really big when it comes to the reformer, where, if you are changing from exercise to exercise, that usually means that you're changing a spring. Well, hopefully you are, all right? And then things like, the foot bar and the box and stuff like that. And more position changes if you're a little bit behind on your cueing per se, or maybe even that your clients have spaced out and haven't listened to you for half a second. They might actually have the reformer in the correct position. They start doing the exercise, then something funny happens, and that's obviously no good. Whereas if you can stay within the boundaries of like keeping a good mechanical understanding of your programming, you're probably going to get a better result with the exercise, but also relatively keep them quite safe. There are some positions that for your clients, they're probably not going to like to stay for very long, and I think that's important for us to note that, if you're having, a class with, let's say, for example, you have elderly population in your class, you're probably not going to want to have a stack of exercise that flow well on full point kneeling the whole time, for example. It might start to cause problems for their wrist, et cetera, so it's good to sort of take that in consideration, that you're not only writing a program that mechanically works well, but also you want to start thinking about the people that you're actually taking in class as well.
Yeah. And I think doing any of the classes that you write and program is really important so that you can feel what it actually feels like. I'm all for keeping it simple, definitely centering principle, definitely layering of exercises. And then also you've got to take into account not too many body position changes, what you were saying before, because some people transition quickly. Other people, you'll say, okay, now let's, stand up, and 5 seconds later they're thinking about standing up, and then 10 seconds later they start moving. You just actually get through more exercises. Absolutely. When you're not changing springs as often, you're not changing position as often. So the layering and similar exercises, similar positions, similar springs when you're on the reformer, definitely a huge one.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there anything funny anything else that you've seen that's funny that, that's made you go, oh, that's a bit strange? Or?
I think one of the biggest things is some of the more advanced exercises, like your teasers, which you can do on the mat and the reformer. I've been in many classes before where we might be doing teaser on the reformer, and it's not an advanced class, it's a regular class. People in the class, you can tell they probably haven't been before. And almost as a client in the class, everyone's about to neck themselves. You almost want to stand up and start helping people. And then there was no lead into of, let's do some precursor exercises, no warm up, no, there's no kind of really forethought on, okay, maybe this exercise isn't the appropriate choice for a regular class with new people in the first place. But, even if you are including it, how do you put some exercises before it that's going to help people activate, learn the movements and progress into it? So I think you really need to really think logically about that. And I guess that's what we've got our matwork and reformer courses. You can go on and do obviously the matwork progressions, reformer progressions, and there's huge programming components in that, because you can't just jump into an advanced exercise. You need to have done all of the stages leading up to that as well. That's I don't know, just the safety. As I said before, I did do a class one time. It was a mat work class, and I'm not kidding. I think we spent the first 20 minutes doing roll down stretch, and I didn't even get a sore back, and I had a sore back. I don't know. You do see some weird things, and you go to amazing classes too. Don't get me wrong. I'm just talking about the ones that weren't particularly amazing. You just you see some kind of strange things sometimes, but.
Yeah. It is always interesting. You obviously never want to belittle anyone or tell anyone that their exercise selection is no good or anything like that, but it is worth just having a bit of a think about it as well. When I first started out, I'd be like, oh, I think this workout or this program's the best, but then when you actually have clients in front of you trying to teach them that whole sequence, then you start thinking going, oh, actually, that's probably not the best, and you go back to the drawing board. You use the same processes of centering and layering, and then adjust it based on the clients that you have, and then you find something that's a bit better. Just because you think it might be cool, actually probably isn't going to be sometimes.
That's an interesting one, because often instructors think that they have to have this like insane variety of all these crazy, cool looking exercises. And we've been there before too, because as an instructor, you're like, oh, this will be fun to teach.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's not always necessarily the best, and there's such a small percentage of people that can do those exercises. And they take so long to explain. So, even if you have a super advanced client, if you're programming an entire class of those kind of Instagram worthy, cool looking, kind of scarily cool exercises, by the time you explain them to that person, even if you're doing a one-on-one with someone that's a dancer, for example, like they don't get through many exercises because it takes so long for them to even learn how to get into the position for that. And it might be an exercise that looks cool but doesn't particularly work anywhere thoroughly, So I still think that the bulk of the programs need to be, I'm not saying basic or simple because most Pilates exercises aren't basic or simple, but you don't need to have these crazy, fandangled things in there to actually do a great class. And a lot of people can't do them in the first place. So I think, a lot of instructors, particularly if they themselves are very strong and flexible, kind of think everyone's going to be able to do that. The longer you teach, the more people you take. You probably tend to use less of, I've used less of those. Same?
Yeah. I think that's a really good point that you mentioned there, Tanya, because sometimes when you write a program, you're writing a program to satisfy yourself as opposed to thinking about writing a program that's going to get the best result for the client. Sometimes those really cool, complicated exercises are really fun for me to teach because I can see it happening and that's cool. I really, really like it. But then just like you said, it could be, after that whole class, that client or the clients are just sitting here just going, it felt hard, but I probably actually didn't get anything out of it, And if you think about it, by the end of the day, that's not really going to keep someone fit and strong and healthy for the rest of their life, you know? And that's really what we should be looking out for.
Yeah, and even when you think about it, some people go to the gym. Some people love the gym. Some people not gym fans, but, it's probably one of the most popular forms of exercise, right? And when you go to the gym, you literally do the same single dimension boring movements over and over for your whole life. Because they work, and it's the same for Pilates. Pilates has way more variety than the gym. There's so many exercises that you can do. But I still think it's probably us more that want to add the more variety than necessarily the clients, And I think the thing is that, Pilates, when people first start, the biggest reason they stop coming is because they're like, oh, it's all too hard and I'm not very good at it, So even with the programming, I think, if you're thinking of like week to week to week for your classes, I would say to try and keep, a certain percentage of it the same and only change a certain percentage every week because no one gets to master an exercise until they've done it quite a few times.
That's right.
So if every single time a new person comes, you give them an entire class of new exercises, they feel unco for a long time because they don't get to master any of them. So I think there's definitely value in, having a percentage of your class that is similar-ish each week, and over time you deviate what that is, but you can't just change the whole class completely every single week.
Yeah, no, I agree, totally.